In a seemingly peaceful small town, there lived an ordinary and happy family of four. This town, located far from the hustle and bustle of the big cities, was a close-knit community where the residents knew each other well and rarely encountered crime or disruption. The sense of security was so strong that people seldom had their guard up, trusting in the tranquility of their daily lives. The victims, a family of four, were well liked by the town's people. The father was a hard-working man, while the mother worked at a local shop. They had two children, a teenage daughter, and a younger son. Every day the family went about their routine in this serene town with no hint of trouble on the horizon. Their future seemed as stable and peaceful as the lives they had always known. However, one morning, the peace of this town was shattered. Neighbors noticed something unusual. The family, who would normally be up and about early in the day, had been eerily quiet. The children hadn't gone to school and the parents hadn't appeared at their workplaces. Concerned, one neighbor knocked on their door but received no response. Worried, the neighbor decided to call the police. After receiving the report, the police rushed to the crime scene. What was once a warm and welcoming home had now turned into a horrifying crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry at the door, no broken locks, no shattered windows. Everything appeared intact, raising suspicions among the police that the victims might have willingly let the perpetrator inside, or perhaps the killer was someone they knew well. As they entered the house, the scene that greeted the officers was beyond gruesome. The father lay in a pool of blood on the living room floor, furniture overturned around him, and shattered items scattered about, indicating a brief struggle. At the end of the hallway, the mother's body was found near the door, as if she had been trying to escape before being ruthlessly killed. The young son was discovered in his bedroom, his innocent face frozen in fear, while the daughter lay lifeless in her room, having met the same tragic fate as the rest of her family. Yet there were very few obvious clues left behind at the scene. The killer seemed to have been extremely careful, as there were almost no fingerprints, footprints, or other tangible traces of their presence. It appeared that everything had been meticulously cleaned, leaving behind only the chaos and the chilling aftermath of death. The meticulousness of the crime scene left investigators even more puzzled. The killer seemed to know the family well and executed their plan swiftly and efficiently. Faced with such a brutal scene, the police had to act quickly. They began collecting evidence meticulously, combing through every detail of the house, from the victim's clothing to every corner of the rooms, hoping to find even the smallest trace of the killer. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducted preliminary examinations on the victim's wounds, estimating the time of death and determining the type of weapon used. As the search progressed, the police discovered something unusual. Although the crime scene had been carefully cleaned, in the daughter's room they found a hidden cell phone, one she didn't seem to have used openly. On this phone, the investigators found several unread messages from an unknown individual. From the content of these messages, the police suspected that this person might be directly connected to the case. Next, the investigation focused on tracing the victim's final movements. The police carefully reconstructed a timeline of the family's activities before the crime, trying to piece together the events leading up to the murders. Interviews with family members and neighbors provided further insights into the family's social circle and lifestyle. According to the neighbors, the family had not been involved in any noticeable conflicts, and everything seemed peaceful. However, some close friends of the daughter mentioned that she had been acting strangely in recent weeks, often locking herself in her room to chat with someone, though she never disclosed any details to her family or friends. As the investigation deepened, the police began to hypothesize that this might have been a murder orchestrated by someone familiar with the victims. The lack of forced entry and the appearance of harmony within the family all pointed toward the possibility of an insider or someone close to the family. Investigators expanded the scope of their inquiry, focusing on the family's social network, particularly the daughter's interactions with others. During this initial phase of the investigation, the police not only faced the brutality of the murder scene, but also the challenge of untangling a web of confusing and conflicting clues. This quadruple murder seemed, at first glance, to have no clear motive, and there was little direct evidence at the scene. Yet, it was precisely this eerie calm and complexity that made the investigation so difficult. Every detail of the case was now under intense scrutiny, and investigators knew that they needed to find the flaw in the killer's carefully crafted plan in order to uncover the truth behind the murders. As the investigation deepened, the police's attention turned to the victim's daughter's boyfriend. Although there were initially few leads, the hidden phone and unread messages discovered in the daughter's room raised suspicions. The content of these messages and the name of the sender pointed to a close connection between the boyfriend and the case. Even more suspiciously, the boyfriend's sudden disappearance after the murders made him a prime suspect. The police quickly began a background check on the boyfriend, hoping to uncover more clues from his life and past. Through interviews with his family, friends, and schoolmates, investigators began to piece together his profile. Beneath an otherwise ordinary exterior, the boyfriend had a troubling history. Despite his young age, the police found multiple records of emotional instability. Friends revealed that he often flew into fits of rage over trivial matters, with severe mood swings. He had even been involved in several street fights. Further investigation into his school life showed that he was an average student with distant relationships from his peers and a generally reclusive nature. What had once seemed like a sweet high school romance between him and the victim's daughter was now being viewed differently. Friends of the daughter revealed that their relationship had become increasingly volatile in recent months, with frequent intense arguments. The boyfriend displayed extreme possessiveness and a controlling nature, especially when the daughter interacted with others. The police learned that the boyfriend had previously undergone psychological treatment for his emotional issues, but the therapy had been inconsistent, with little effect. Just recently, he had allegedly threatened the daughter, warning her that there would be severe consequences if she ever tried to end the relationship. This information only heightened the police's suspicions about him. At the same time, the investigation uncovered tension between the boyfriend and the victim's family. The parents were uncomfortable with his possessiveness and had repeatedly urged their daughter to end the relationship. However, the daughter seemed unable to escape the emotional hold the boyfriend had on her, trapped in a psychological struggle. This family tension may have been a key factor in the escalation of the situation. As the boyfriend's whereabouts remained unknown, the police intensified their efforts to track him down. His sudden disappearance was highly suspicious. If he were innocent, he would likely have cooperated with the investigation instead of evading it after the murders. Furthermore, while tracing his last known movements, the police found that on the day of the murders, he had exchanged a series of messages with the daughter. Although the full content of the messages had not yet been decoded, it was clear that the conversations might be directly linked to the tragic events of that day. The police also discovered that the boyfriend had fled the town shortly after the murders, using public transportation to travel to a distant city. During their search, they found suspicious items in his home, including a piece of clothing stained with blood. Forensic tests were conducted on the items, and while the results could not immediately confirm whether the blood belonged to one of the victims, the evidence was enough to increase the suspicion around him. As the investigation progressed, more questions began to arise. Did the boyfriend truly plan these murders? If so, what was his motive? Was the conflict between him and the daughter severe enough to drive him to kill her entire family? These questions remained unanswered, but his disappearance had undoubtedly made him the primary suspect in this quadruple murder case. In the days that followed, the police released his photo and details to the public, hoping for assistance in locating him. However, as the case became more complex, investigators realized they might be dealing with something far more intricate than a simple relationship dispute. There could be a deeper, more sinister plot lurking beneath the surface. As the police delved deeper into the investigation of the victim's daughter's boyfriend, they stumbled upon a shocking revelation that further complicated the case. By analyzing the boyfriend's phone, social media accounts, and other digital records, investigators discovered that he had been maintaining close contact with another mysterious woman. This woman was someone he had never met in real life, their entire relationship conducted through the internet. The discovery of this hidden online connection added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. The police soon realized that this woman had been using a fabricated identity to communicate with the boyfriend. Her online persona was carefully crafted, exuding a mysterious and captivating allure that seemed to speak directly to the boyfriend's vulnerabilities. Through social media, instant messaging apps, and emails, they engaged in frequent conversations, and over time, she began manipulating his emotions. What initially seemed like harmless online flirting took a darker turn as the police uncovered that this woman had been psychologically influencing the boyfriend's behavior. In their conversation logs, the woman frequently discussed the boyfriend's life problems, particularly his turbulent relationship with the victim's daughter. Gradually, she began to stoke his frustrations and resentment toward the victim and her family, subtly encouraging him to take more extreme measures to resolve his issues. Although she never explicitly told him to commit a crime, her words were carefully chosen, dripping with psychological manipulation. The police realized that she had skillfully guided the boyfriend down a dangerous path through subtle hints and encouragement. As the investigators analyzed the boyfriend's psychological state, it became clear that he had developed an unhealthy emotional dependence on this online relationship. To him, this mysterious woman seemed to be the only person who truly understood him, which blurred the lines between reality and the virtual world. The deeper his attachment grew, the more impulsive and volatile his behavior became. Every time he argued with the victim's daughter or felt tension within the family, this woman would appear on the other end of the conversation, offering false comfort. It was through this manipulation that the boyfriend's emotional state spiraled out of control, inching him closer to committing a violent act. As the investigation unfolded, the police finally uncovered the true identity of the mysterious woman. By tracking her IP address and online accounts, they found that she was nothing like she had presented herself to be. In fact, her entire online persona had been fabricated, from the photos she used to the name and personal details she shared. This catfishing scheme was meticulously orchestrated, revealing a high level of planning and intent. Her motives, however, were not immediately clear. Further investigation into the woman's background showed that she was far from an ordinary online scammer. She had a history of using multiple fake identities on various social platforms, targeting several men and attempting to manipulate them emotionally. In the case of the boyfriend, she had clearly taken her tactics to a more extreme level. Through long-term emotional manipulation, she fueled his hatred toward the victim's family, ultimately pushing him toward violence. After combing through thousands of their chat messages, police discovered that the woman had frequently used suggestive language, especially in the weeks leading up to the murders. She mentioned phrases like "putting an end to the pain" or "finding the only solution," cryptic messages that placed immense psychological pressure on the boyfriend. He seemed to believe that violence was the only way to resolve the growing tension between him, the victim, and her family. As the digital investigation progressed, the police began shifting their focus away from just the boyfriend and started targeting this woman. She was no longer just a mysterious figure behind a screen, but rather a central figure in orchestrating the crime. Her elaborate deception and manipulation made the boyfriend a tool in her hands, ultimately leading to the brutal quadruple murder. Determined to uncover the full extent of her role in the case, the police intensified their efforts to track down her real identity and investigate her actions further. They also explored whether she had been involved in similar cases of emotional manipulation and online deception. The complexity of this catfishing scheme and the psychological control she exerted over the boyfriend stunned the investigators, revealing that this case was far more intricate than they had initially thought. The woman's manipulation not only destroyed a family but also exposed the hidden dangers of the online world, where deception and psychological abuse could lead to devastating consequences. Further investigation unveiled the root of her animosity towards the victim's family. Years earlier, she had had a complicated relationship with a member of the victim's family. Although the police did not disclose all the details, it was evident that this relationship had left an indelible scar in her heart. Unable to let go, she was filled with a desire for revenge. The victim's family became the target for her pent-up hatred, and the boyfriend served as her tool to execute her vendetta. The woman had never physically appeared at the crime scene, nor had she met the boyfriend in person, yet every aspect of her plan was meticulously crafted as if she were pulling the strings behind the scenes. Through long-term emotional manipulation, she convinced the boyfriend that he was saving their relationship. In her cold calculation, he was merely a puppet she controlled. As the investigation deepened, the police gradually pieced together the full picture of the case, ultimately focusing on the mysterious woman. Through social media analysis, communication records, and testimonies from the victim's family members, the police constructed a complete chain of evidence that demonstrated her manipulative role in the entire murder plan. Every piece of information pointed to her true identity, and the police realized that this woman was not only the emotional manipulator of the boyfriend, but also the mastermind behind the entire criminal conspiracy. When the police finally decided to arrest her, all preparations were in place. She was apprehended at her residence during a raid. Faced with the sudden presence of law enforcement, her reaction was surprising. At first, she appeared quite calm, even attempting to inquire in a steady voice about what was happening. However, as the police presented evidence and identified her, her demeanor gradually changed to one of panic, revealing signs of anxiety and fear in her eyes. She realized that the web of lies she had woven and the world of manipulation she created were about to collapse. During the transport to the police station, the woman exhibited a complex and contradictory psychological state. On one hand, she felt anger, believing she was a misunderstood victim. On the other, she had to confront the crime she had committed. As the interrogation deepened, she began to reveal her manipulative tactics and criminal motivations, shocking the investigators. She not only admitted to her control over the boyfriend, but also unabashedly expressed her hatred for the victim's family, stating that she had acted out of a desire for revenge. Her cunning and ruthlessness left the police in disbelief. This kind of psychological manipulation had not only led an innocent person down a tragic path, but had also, in the process, destroyed a family. The police recognized how powerful virtual identities and psychological control could be, allowing a young person to become a murderer of an innocent victim. As the case progressed, they not only uncovered the truth behind the murder, but also came to a profound understanding of the dangers posed by such manipulation. Ultimately, the woman was charged with multiple offenses, facing the prospect of legal consequences and judgment for the harm she had caused. The case entered the courtroom phase, drawing a large crowd of media and the public eager to uncover the truth behind the horrifying quadruple murder. In the courtroom, the suspect sat in the defendant's chair, her face pale and appearing somewhat anxious. Although she tried to maintain her composure, the tension and fear reflected in her eyes constantly reminded everyone of the serious charges she faced. Her defense attorney worked hard to portray the case as a misunderstanding, arguing that her actions stemmed from love and protection for her boyfriend, rather than malicious manipulation. The defense strategy emphasized her relationship with the boyfriend, attempting to steer the court's focus toward their emotional bond and claiming that she was not the true perpetrator. Meanwhile, the police investigation and evidence revealed that the boyfriend was merely a tool in this tragedy. Under the woman's manipulation, He had embarked on the path of crime, deeply influenced by her emotional and psychological control. In court, the prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including chat records and eyewitness testimonies, indicating that the boyfriend had little independent decision-making ability during the crime. Ultimately, the boyfriend was also charged with murder as a co-defendant and faced trial. The court determined that he was not entirely innocent, but was rather a victim of manipulation. After several weeks of hearings, the court reached a final verdict. The woman was sentenced to life imprisonment on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and psychological manipulation. Her behavior in court did not elicit sympathy from the public. Instead, it sparked more anger and condemnation. The boyfriend received a lighter sentence. Considering his passive role and psychological state in the incident, he would undergo psychological treatment and serve a limited prison term with the aim of reintegrating into society. The verdict prompted widespread attention and discussion in society. Many began to reflect on the dangers of online deception and manipulation. The case not only revealed the dark sides of online interactions, but also led to profound thoughts on the authenticity of virtual identities. Experts called for the public to remain vigilant when engaging with strangers online, as the manipulators behind the scenes could have irreversible impacts on their lives. The societal response to this case further fueled discussions about online safety and mental health. Many people began to focus on how to improve awareness against online fraud and manipulative behaviors. While the case may have concluded, the lessons it imparted would continue to resonate within society, warning individuals about how to protect themselves in an information-driven era and avoid falling into the traps of emotional manipulation.